We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. We've got an old favorite coming on the show today as a guest, Eric from Iowa, analytical Iowan. And Eric, thanks for taking the time to join us today. How's it been going? Eric, sounds like you've been busy with
Well,
the
thanks for
lives on
having me.
TikToks.
I have been. I've been doing 4 to 7 a week. Um,
Wow.
just I get bored. Uh, yeah, I got nothing going on. Okay, I'll jump on, do a live. Sometimes my sister messages me, "Hey, you going live tonight?" Yeah, okay, sure, why not? That's about all the arm twisting I need. Um, then the other night you went live and TJ told me, "Hey, Mike's going live." Okay, cool. I'll just watch that instead. I took the night off.
Yeah.
But I've been doing a lot of lives and I really enjoy it.
Well, it's kind of fun because, one of the things about doing a podcast or a live, it's really helpful to have the input from the listeners or the viewers, and the questions come in pretty quickly, so it really keeps the pace up, and I keep talking so I don't realize how long I'm going, and I don't get as tired as if I was doing it myself. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I do too. I like the lives where I can just keep going. Somebody will give me a prompt that'll take me in a direction I never intended to even talk about that night, and off we go. And it does fill the silence as you try to sit there. About the time you try to throw something out there and fill a gap, and somebody else pops in with a comment, and now you're reacting to that, and
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
fun.
I like watching your lives because you got a lot of details. I'm not a detail oriented guy. I'm more of a bigger picture guy in general terms. But you dig out the details. You're good at the research, and it's helpful to me to watch your live. Sometimes I don't go into the live. I'll just sit on the For You page and watch it because I don't. A lot of the followers you have are the followers I have, and I don't want people trying to engage me because that's not what it's about. It's about what you're talking about. You got more important thing to say than I would at that particular point.
Well, I mean, you could jump in, sure. Wouldn't bother me. I just engage with whoever throws comments in the comment section, and sometimes I'll jump in the middle. We'll be having a conversation between two of them, and I'll just jump in as a point there. Okay, I see what you guys are talking about. Well, here's my take on it, and I
Yeah.
just kind of go. They keep their conversation going, but I just comment on it. I am pretty good with details. For some reason, I've always been good at memorizing weird historical stuff. Um, just oddball, weird history,
Yeah, it is helpful when
or
you come up out
piecing
of,
the yeah, or like let's say or piecing some of it together, like talking about. We were talking right before the show started about Steve Bannon at the Young Republicans Club,
right.
saying Donald Trump could run for a third term. Well, I said it in my live a couple times earlier that by the time they passed the 22nd Amendment in what was it, 57, I think is when it was ratified. 50, I think it was 57. Maybe it was 52. Either way, in the 1950s, they already had Grover Cleveland run for two non-consecutive terms. That had already happened. And
Right.
they'd already had Teddy Roosevelt serve two terms and then try to run as a bull moose for a third term non-consecutive. So that was something they had already seen historically. If they meant two consecutive and you could try again, that's what they would have said. They knew what they were saying.
Right. Well, that we were talking about this before, and it's one thing for Republicans to say that because they're dumb motherfuckers. But when I hear the Democrats whining, "Oh, he'll just run again and win," first of all, he'll be 82 years old, and I don't think he's making it to 82. Thirdly, or secondly, the Constitution says no. And if you think Donald Trump's powerful enough to change the Constitution, well, you're too much of a whiny bitch for me because he's not. And neither are the Republicans. They don't have enough power. To change the Constitution is a pretty involved process that they just don't have the capabilities of doing or the time to do it because it doesn't happen overnight.
No, it doesn't. They have it takes two-thirds of both chambers of Congress. Now, not haven't done the math exactly, but it's 300 and some members of the House. It
Right.
takes 67 senators. They don't have that. And it takes 38 states to agree to change the Constitution. And usually they put a time frame on there as well, like must be done within 6 years or 7 years or what have you. Like it takes time. They it even ones that they realized were bad almost immediately, like prohibition. It still took them like 3 years to repeal prohibition, and they saw how bad it was almost immediately.
Right. Right. Exactly. And there's the other one too that I think came out in the 70s, the Equal Rights Amendment. They haven't even got that ratified, and that's been 50 years. And that's just equal rights for everybody, for fuck's sake. That's not even controversial.
Well, I did a TikTok on this.
Yeah, please
There's a
expand
hundred
on it.
and plus. Well, there's 100 plus members of the House or Democratic lawmakers. I don't know for sure if they're all in the House. 100 plus Democratic lawmakers have sent a letter to Joe Biden asking him to instruct the I can't think of the right term for the person, but the archivist who is responsible for like keeping control of like the archives and the Constitution and that kind of stuff to publish the Equal Rights Amendment. It has been ratified by 38 states. It has been done. It was ratified in 2020. But there's a problem with it, and that is when they first passed it way back in 72, they put a 7 year time limit on it.
Right.
Before that time limit went off during Carter's administration, Congress passed something else that Carter signed that said that extended the time frame, and I'm not sure to how long, to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. There is some question that even though 38 states have ratified it, if it gets challenged in court, if they could say, well, the original time frame lapsed, it was longer than 7 years, so it doesn't count anyway. We've never had the court say an amendment is unconstitutional or the process to get an amendment was unconstitutional, but there's a lot of questions about this Equal Rights Amendment. And like you said, it's been 50 plus years.
Yeah. I mean, it's fucking crazy. And it's a pretty basic, well, the name of it, equal rights. Who's not for equal rights besides Donald Trump?
Yeah, it's well, and the whole text of it is basically says you will not be discriminated because of your gender. That's it.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons they're now pushing Joe Biden to have it added to the Constitution, saying, well, it was ratified, let's do this, is because they think it will add more protections for everybody leading into the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Some experts are saying that they may have to, in order to get it to pass because of the time limit thing, they may have to start all over and start with Congress again.
Right.
You know,
Right.
there's a lot of question about it, but this should have been ratified already. It should have been done in the 70s, but obviously the 70s are the 70s.
Yeah. The 70s were dealing with a different era. This was before or during the time when women were trying to get equal rights, equal pay, and just treated like peers as opposed to second class citizens. I mean, if you didn't live in the 70s, you would be appalled by the things that were going on there. It was a whole different parallel universe than what you know now. So some of these young kids that were born in the late 90s or 2000s, they wouldn't even fucking believe the kinds of things that went on back then. So we have made some progress, but we've also stepped back a bit. Did you happen to see the press conference that Donald Trump did at Mar-a-Lago?
I didn't see the conference itself. I saw some news clippings about it and some of the stuff
Yeah.
he was talking about. And the bits I saw, oh, good Lord, this guy's an idiot. We knew this, but
Well,
man, is he an idiot.
well, yeah, that's exactly right. What I was surprised that he was speaking clearly, more clearly than we're used to seeing him, probably because it was during the day and the sundown effect hadn't hit him yet. But he was speaking clearly, but everything he said was jumbled. None of it made any sense. He's not a very articulate man. He talks a lot, but he doesn't really pull words together to create good sentences. But there's something he was talking about. Somebody asked him about the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. situation and vaccinations and stuff like that. And um, he basically said, I'm going to have RFK check into this and that, and nothing's going to happen fast. And I know a lot of you are worried about them pulling the polio vaccine. We're not going to do that. I'm very well aware that polio was a serious thing. Some of my friends' lives were saved because of polio. And it surprised me that he said that. Uh, and I think part of it has to do with him trying to settle things down a little bit before he gets into office, because his strategy up to this point is to cause fear and chaos. And now he's getting pressed on some pretty stupid shit like the polio vaccine and other vaccines. So um, it was weird to see him say that. And then he went off on a tangent suggesting that, how vaccines might have some bearing on autism. So this fucker's all over the board, from QAnon shit to God knows what.
Well, yeah, and I know in part where he gets the idea for the autism thing. It's a couple things. He said in his press conference that he remembers in the 80s and 90s that the numbers for autism was like 1 in 200,000, 1 in 100,000, something like that. And now it's down to
Right.
like 1 in 100 or something. And he's like, well, I want to get to the bottom of that. There's got to be something causing it. Yeah, what's caused it is more understanding of it, a wider range of what they consider in the spectrum of autism. So yes, you're going to have more diagnosis, more doctors being willing to diagnose it. It's nothing nefarious. It's just a better understanding. But as
It's
far as
kind of
his
like
idea that
it's
vaccine,
it's it's kind of like when he said, "Stop testing for COVID. We won't have so many COVID cases." Same kind of deal.
exactly. I said that. I believe I was talking about it in my live, and I said the same thing. He said, "No test for COVID. We won't have COVID." Doesn't make a damn bit of sense. But in the 90s, there was one, who published a paper that said vaccines cause autism. And that doctor has since lost his medical license
Right.
and rescinded the paper. He recanted and said, yeah, there's really no evidence. I was wrong. But ever since it's been out there, that one guy has been the one everybody else points to as, well, see, a doctor said it.
Right. And it spread like wildfire because it's not just RFK Jr. It's tons of celebrities and people you wouldn't expect to say that. They're solidly behind that. And that's the trouble with this country. Somebody hears one thing that sets them off and they start repeating it as if it's real and it's true. And that's it. I mean, if you want to talk about what causes autism, if in fact we have more autism than we had back in the day, and I can tell you when I was in the 70s, when I was a kid in the 70s, I never heard of anybody having autism, but I did see kids with mental disabilities, and they were probably labeled something different, something wrong, um, because but let's what's changed since the 70s to now? Our food, more preservatives, all kinds of shit. Any one of those things could be responsible for it. Yeah, we should dig into it. We should investigate it, but not be dragged off the trail on some stupid shit.
Yeah, you're right. Well, somebody in my comments in the live when we were talking about it kind of said the same thing. There's more testing. They have better understandings. People aren't, mislabeled now. Whereas
Right.
before it was a misdiagnosis or they called them something else. That was your uh mentally handicapped people. They were put in group homes, that kind of stuff in the 60s, 70s and earlier. That kind of thing. Whereas
Well,
now
and
we know what it is, we know how to deal with it, and there's just a better understanding. That's why you have more cases because people understand it.
well, yeah, I think back in the day they would take kids that were clearly something off about them compared to the average kids, and they'd all categorize them mentally disabled, and they treat them all the same way. And let's be honest, I know some people with autism. They are maybe mentally different, but they aren't mentally disabled. In many ways, they're advanced. over some people.
Hmm.
It's just a variation on who we are, and it's not a retardation really. It's just something different, and that's the thing. A lot of people don't understand it. They think anybody who's different is one thing, and that's not it.
Yeah, that's the problem here. And then how you have somebody in a Donald Trump who is, and well, an RFK Jr. to the same extent, they're about in the same age range, 70 plus,
Yeah,
who grew up in a different time period, who think it's something nefarious when it's not, and that pre-built age bias is right there, and they don't realize it. Donald Trump is too stupid to realize that the fact that he is 78 years old is affecting his judgment on things because he expects things to be the way they were way back when.
yeah. I was going to ask you, did you see this thing? Uh, this guy Luigi, who shot the CEO, and of course all the Republicans um, were screaming at we were animals because we were supporting the guy who shot the CEO. Uh, but then we've got this guy that choked out a mentally disabled homeless man on a subway or something like that, or a bus or something, or in a bus depot. Um, and he had to go on trial for murder, and he was not convicted. And now the Trumplafucks are hailing him as a hero, want to get him the uh, Medal of Freedom when Donald Trump's in office. It's just ironic. They like the kid Kyle Rittenhouse. They like this guy. He's been found innocent, so he should just go away and count himself lucky because it was questionable whether he had a reason to do what he did. But they've got to take him to a football game, Army, Navy, and fucking hail this guy as a conquering hero and want to reward him for his activities. But they still have the audacity to be mad at Democrats or Republicans for that matter who are saying, maybe it's time we do get back at these health insurance companies. It's just weird how they can't see the comparison there.
Yeah, they don't see it at all. And I hadn't heard about this guy with the subway thing, but you're right. Um it's effectively the same thing. The
Yeah.
difference is Luigi went after a billionaire and the other guy went after a homeless guy. And
The the real difference here is Luigi went after a rich white guy and this guy went after a poor black man. That's the real difference. It's
there it
about
is.
racism.
Yeah.
They throw it out, this racism thing, they walk around as racist with fucking pride.
Yeah, they do. And I think this is the last gasp of the MAGA movement. Um, After Donald Trump, MAGA is going away. I do believe. Um, they may try to stay around, but hopefully the racism tapers back down with it being gone. But unfortunately, because of Donald Trump and his racist rhetoric, they feel like they feel emboldened to say and do things that should have been, left well back before the 60s.
Yeah. I've heard people say that MAGA will stick around even after Donald Trump's gone, and I agree with you. I don't think so. They need this folk hero of theirs to lead it. And there really is nobody that can replace Donald Trump in terms of the kind of, I don't want to say leader, but that's what I have to say. When Donald Trump dies or is out of office, um, MAGA is gonna fizzle out. They just don't have the wherewithal to maintain the shit they're doing. They don't have the power to do it once Donald Trump's gone. And this is all about people being concerned or afraid of Donald Trump. When he's no longer a problem, MAGA will be stepped on like a fucking bug.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've been saying JD Vance could maybe have a chance at grasping that group for a little bit, but
Yeah,
it
maybe.
really is going to depend on exactly what happens with Trump. If Trump serves out his term and Vance gets his blessing to run for his own term, maybe he can capture some of the MAGA magic. If Donald Trump passes and Vance is unexpectedly tossed into the presidency because Donald Trump died, maybe he could capture the MAGA magic. If they have to 25th Amendment him and Vance has to lead the charge, he's done. They will hate him
Yeah.
worse than they hate Mike Pence. If the 25th Amendment, or not the 25th Amendment, if they have to impeach and remove Trump, unless JD Vance puts up one hell of a fight to save Trump and makes a big production out of it, and well, I did everything I could, but that was those rhinos in Congress. He's done too. The only way he survives is either Trump has to live out his term or die.
Yeah. Well, with the 25th Amendment, Vance has to be on board. If he's not on board, the
Yeah.
25th Amendment doesn't work. The impeachment, a little different thing. But of course, Vance is the president. As vice president, he is the president of the Senate, too. So if it's close, it's going to be on his head. There's another factor, though, about whether J.D. Vance has any power going into the future. How does the country look? We know what Donald Trump is talking about doing is going to crash the economy. And if JD Vance is in the thick of it, he's going to be held responsible too. I just don't, if Donald Trump does half the things he's talking about doing, it's going to be bad for the country, bad for a lot of people. And it's just not going to do well for any Republican in 26 or in 28.
Oh yeah. If he does half of what he wants to do and half of what he's attempting to do, if he even, if he tries the tariffs, even if it only works has them on for a little bit, and say Canada shuts off the oil coming to the United States and the power, unless Vance is unless somehow Vance is able to closely navigate that whole thing, he's going to be caught up in the negative reaction to all of
Yeah.
it, and he's going to be uh, dealt one hell of a blow. The stink of Donald Trump is going to be on Vance for a long time. Now, if Donald Trump sits back, doesn't do jack shit about anything, and lets the economy run as is, and things are looking pretty good, Vance could maybe ride that out, and it wouldn't hurt him to be associated with Donald Trump nearly as bad. But if the economy's in the shitter, he's done.
Well, if Donald Trump was smart, he would let things ride for the first couple of years to make it better for 2026. But Donald Trump is not smart. He doesn't care what happens in 2026. He really doesn't have a lot to lose. He doesn't really care if anything gets accomplished anyway. He just wants the power and the adulation and the bully pulpit to say what he wants to do. And that's what the Republicans must understand by now. Donald Trump isn't a productive guy. He's not somebody who builds anything, in spite of his business was buildings, but he doesn't really build anything. He's only adept at tearing things down. And all he has when he's president is a Republican House and a Republican Senate. What the fuck are you going to tear down?
Yeah, and he's not smart enough to know that some of what he's trying to do is bad, in part because he doesn't understand what these things are. There's a
And he
TikTok
won't
creator.
he won't admit he's wrong
Um,
either under any
no, he won't.
circumstance.
Well, there's a TikTok creator. I can't think of her name now. She's the Canadian teacher. Um, I think it's Unlearn something.
Okay.
I think it's her handle. She goes in and she did a 3-minute TikTok explaining something that Donald Trump doesn't understand, and that's the difference between a trade deficit and a trade subsidy.
Right.
And we're in a trade deficit with Canada. We buy
Yeah.
way more from them than they buy from us. But in part, we have 330 million people in this country. They have 40 million. That
Right.
makes sense. Um, what a subsidy would be, it's like what we do with the farmers. And she used corn as a perfect example. She goes, okay, if the international price for corn is $1 an ear, she goes, simple math. Well, that's fine. If that's what the farmer needs to sell it at is $1 an ear to break even. She goes, okay. But if Mexico is growing corn and they can sell it for 80 cents an ear, break even, the federal government pays the farmer 25 cents an ear. So they can sell it at 75 and still break even at the dollar price they were getting before. That's a
Right.
subsidy. And that's the difference. Donald Trump doesn't have a clue about the difference in those two words, doesn't care. He thinks they mean the same thing. He is a complete moron, but people give him credit for being intelligent because he was president, he was or is CEOs of multiple companies, and now he's going to be president again. They think just by virtue of him having the office, he knows something, and he apparently knows more than we do sitting here talking about it.
The thing is, even though he doesn't know anything about it, it would be okay under normal circumstances because he would have advisors who pointed him in the right direction. The problem with that is right now is he doesn't listen to shit. He does what he wants to do. And secondly, the people around him aren't interested in succeeding. They're interested in tearing things down. So he can't help but lose in this situation. They're going to come out and say, you'll look tough if we put these tariffs on. Donald Trump will say, fuck yeah, let's put the tariffs on. Let's see what happens. And then after the fact, he'll try to make some excuse or blame somebody else for the bad economy. But he's going to have a tough time doing that after all his claims and all his promises. People are already starting to get a little hinky about what he claimed before the election and what he's claiming now. He's not really sticking to his promises.
Well, you're right. And, he's going to have these advisors that want to do this stupid stuff. And hopefully, one of his advisors, somebody around him, can get to him and say, hey, this person's out to make you look like a dumbass. You're going to be the scapegoat if these things don't work. And they're setting you up to look like a fool, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to look like a winner if you fire them and go this other way. Because that's what he responds to. Well, it's
Yeah.
probably not going to happen. What's going to probably happen is these things are going to go bad. He's going to get the person after it's gone bad. Somebody else come pat him on the back and say, yeah, that thing so and so told you to go do. Well, it made you look like a real idiot. We're seeing the results. This is what it's doing. We need to get on top of this. We need to do something. So let's reverse it. Let's change it. Let's try something different. But you need to get rid of that guy. That guy's the problem.
Right.
And they'll do it
Right.
after the
Well,
fact. And he'll be going through advisors like he did his first term. They'll be firing him after the fact, after they already fucked him over.
and that's why I can't understand why anybody wants the job. It might explain why there's no legitimate people who are candidates because they know better than to get caught up in that bullshit. I had a question for you though. You're likely to know more about this than I do. People are worried about the military thing, the Pete Hegseth thing. I get a kick out of this guy is an absolute dirtball piece of shit, sexual predator, drunk, and now they're out hitting up senators and they're saying, well, Pete's getting a little momentum here. How is that fucking possible? He's not getting momentum. But the question I have is everybody, including Donald Trump, are suggesting he's going to get in there. He's going to get pushed back by generals, but he'll just start firing generals. And I don't know enough about that circumstance. Can he just go in, sit down, and fire every fucking general?
I don't think so. I'm not up on exactly what he can do in that situation either. Because they have contracts, right?
Right.
So they would have contracts for so many, for so long. And I think their contracts are guaranteed unless they get court-martialed for bad behavior or whatever. I think the Universal Code of Military Justice would apply to a lot of it and would protect them for a lot of it. I could be wrong, but that's what I think. But as far as
I'm
Pete
just look.
Hegseth gaining, go ahead.
I'm just looking at something here. I just Googled it. It says the president shall be commander in chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of several states when called into actual service of the United States. He may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments upon any subject relating to the duties of their respective offices, and he shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons of offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. It's not really saying. I think I think there's a pretty extensive. It looks like there's a pretty extensive procedure, not unlike court martialing that they'd probably have to go through. And again, Donald Trump is more of a bully than a tactician. He'd basically walk into the general and say, "I'm going to fire you if you don't do what I tell you." Then it's a matter of how much integrity that general has. Um, but I don't think he'd just walk in and sign a paper and say you're gone after 40 years and being a general. That's not feasible.
Yeah, I don't think so. I said, I think there are contracts in the Universal Code of Military Justice. Like you said, they'd have to be court-martialed and all sorts of stuff for it to happen.
Yeah,
And the other thing is, when people say, well, he's just going to use the military to do this or to do that, the U.S. military does not swear an oath of loyalty to the president.
exactly.
They don't swear an oath of loyalty to Congress. Their oath is to the Constitution. And the very first part of the Constitution starts with "We the people."
Right.
So they are going to push back when they have to, and I'm pretty sure there's a whole issue about removing people. I don't think that will happen nearly as much as what Donald Trump thinks, because he says a lot of things that he can just do. He said he can remove birthright citizenship with an executive order. Well, that's a goddamn amendment. You can't change an amendment with an executive order. He says a
No,
lot.
you
He's
can't.
not going to be able to do it.
Well, and
As
that's
far as
that,
Pete
that
Hegseth,
that's yeah. Go ahead with Pete Hegseth.
well, as far as Pete Hegseth getting traction, part of what they're doing to get not just him, but some of Donald Trump's worst nominees involved is now they're talking about primarying out any senators that vote against Donald Trump. They're talking. One of Donald Trump's attorneys was talking about hiring private investigators to investigate and dig up any dirt on these senators and leak it to the public. Um, Again, trying to get them voted out. So what I say to them is, if you're going to primary them, do it.
Yeah,
Being an incumbent is huge when it comes to reelection. A lot of people will vote for the name they recognize, and a lot of times that's the incumbent. And you want to vote these senators out when the Senate is going to be up for grabs in 2 years? Do it. Give the
right.
Democrats more chance to gain more seats. I would love it.
Well, and let's be honest, a lot of the primary that they've done up to now hasn't really worked out that well.
No.
Donald Trump's endorsement hasn't been that's that valuable, especially if we're going to be in the middle of a period where the economy sucks. Donald Trump, I think I believe that Donald Trump looked good going into this election to some dumb fucks because they simply forgot the problems they had in the first term. They weren't aware enough to remember all the things that went on. And all they remembered is Donald Trump talks loud, he talks tough. I'm voting for that motherfucker. They don't really remember. But this will be right in the middle of whatever mess or quagmire he's created.
Yeah, that was part of it. And as somebody pointed out in my live that I did before recording this, that they remember Donald Trump's economy pre-COVID, which he was writing effectively Barack Obama's
Obama's.
economy because
Right.
he didn't do much. He passed his tax cuts, but all economists were saying it didn't move the needle much one way or the other, didn't do anything.
Right.
So people remember that. They gave him a lot of credit for that. And then they want to try to give him, some people were giving him a pass for COVID and trying to put all the blame for everything in 2020 because Joe Biden won in 2020 for COVID on Biden. No, that was all Trump. He's the reason we didn't have toilet paper on the shelves. He's the reason we had supply chain issues. He's the reason we didn't have uh, medical equipment for the people we needed them because of how he handled COVID.
Right.
And people forgot that when they ran this election. And I don't know how you would have reminded people of any better than what we did. But that's part of the problem with Donald Trump is there's so much negative about him, so much bad that you have to just people got overwhelmed with how much there was, and they quit listening in part when we were talking about it because they're like, well, clearly that all can't be true because there's just so much.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to the Mueller report, and they say if he wasn't exonerated, why wasn't he in jail? Well, he was found essentially guilty in that investigation of at least 10 occasions of obstruction of justice for which he could have been tried and convicted of. But what they fail to remember is the stupid memo that says you can't indict a sitting president. That's the only reason he wasn't indicted when he was president. So that argument doesn't fucking pan out, but they'll use it every freaking time. Did you hear about the case in the Manhattan district? You know, the hush money thing. We're
Yeah, I
still
heard a
waiting.
little bit about it.
Well, we're still waiting for
That the judge
sentencing.
said,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
Donald Trump made two motions. One just to dismiss it because he's going to be president. The judge hasn't found on that one as yet, but I can't imagine they're going to dismiss it just because he's president. The other one was that Donald Trump claimed they should dismiss it because he had immunity from the Supreme Court, which makes no sense because this all happened before he was president, the hush money situation. And it's a state court, not a federal court. So he gave it a shot and said, I think you should dismiss this because of immunity. And Judge Juan Marchand came out and said, yeah, bullshit. That's not going to happen. We're still waiting for the decision on the dismissal because he's president. I don't think that will happen. He's scheduled to be sentenced at some point. We don't know when or what it'll be. But what are your feelings about that now? I mean, he was convicted by a jury of his peers. You can't just say that didn't happen. So he's going to have that hanging around his neck one way or another.
Yeah. I know, I think it was the defense lawyers that were asking when they were asking for it to be dismissed on the grounds of he's going to be president to keep it from hanging over his head, where the judge could just make a note in the case that, yes, the jury found him guilty, but never sentenced because of becoming president and presidential immunity or something. Just make a footnote in the case and call it good.
Yeah, that doesn't work that way.
I think it's going to be suspended until he's no longer president, whatever date that is. And I think when we get a decision on when the sentencing will be, it'll be like set to be 30 days after he's no longer president or 15 days after he's out of office, something like that, where it'll be open-ended enough that if something were to happen and Donald Trump not make his entire term, whether he has to resign in disgrace, whether it's impeachment, and I don't think he'll resign. That's just not in his nature.
What
But
more disgraceful could happen to get him to resign than what's already happened? Jesus. No, he's not going to resign. He's going to be carried out on a fucking stretcher or by guards. That's the only way he's getting out of there. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
probably, but it'll be something vague enough that when he's no longer president, they'll have so many days. They'll go in, they'll do the sentencing, and I think he's going to get an amount and probably a decent amount of prison time. Not that
Yeah,
it's
I
going
think
to
so.
matter. I don't think he'll live that long. But I think if he was only going to get a cash fine, they wouldn't have moved the sentencing. They would have just given him a fine and a slap on the wrist and said, okay, that's it. Now they can't give him home confinement or a probation and have him be president. So maybe that's an option. But I think it really is, if it was going to be even probation, like 6 months probation, they would have dealt with it ahead of the election. They would
Yeah.
have said, we're just doing it. The fact that it got moved to after the election and now postponed again because he's going to be president leads me to believe that whenever he gets around to sentencing him, it will be prison time. The sad thing is, if Donald Trump doesn't make it
Yeah. He'll get
and
out of it
doesn't
because he'll
live,
die.
well, he'll die. But I don't think we'll ever actually know what the sentence would be because Judge Marchand won't release it because he's dead.
Well,
And then,
there's two ways he can do this, though. He can say, I will suspend the sentencing till after he's no longer president, or he can sentence him and say that's suspended till after he's no longer president. I don't, the second one of actually sentencing him to something and have that hanging over his head, that's going to cause quite a stir. And I don't know if Judge Juan Marchand is interested in doing that or not. But there's still a lot of moving parts in this situation, and we don't know what's going to happen. But I don't think they're going to let him off the hook at all on this thing. I mean, he was convicted. You can't just say,
Yeah,
yeah, it doesn't count.
I don't think they're going to let him off. And the only way he gets out of it between now and after he's out of office is if he dies,
Yeah, I agree.
or if
I agree.
something major medical happens to where like he would still get sentenced, but it would be a completely suspended sentence. Like if he were to have like a stroke 6 months into being in office, where he's basically severely mentally hindered at that point, and he's um like unable to even be president. They have to remove him by the 25th. They'd say, well, you're not fit to go to prison in your medical condition, that kind of thing. That's the only
You
way he
mean
gets
if
out of his sentence.
you mean say for example he was mumbling incoherently and shitting and pissing himself? I think he's there already. I think he's already at that point.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, he's in sorry shape. But I was surprised in this uh, press conference. He did sound, I won't say cognizant because what he was saying made no sense, but he sounded more clearer than we sometimes hear him. I mean, he's typically slurring and mumbling, and he wasn't doing that. Maybe because it was earlier in the day or because his meds were up to date. I don't know what the fuck it was, but he still doesn't have the ability to put together a sentence that makes any sense. Um, and I would think any other president, if Joe Biden did something like that, he'd be crucified. But you won't hear the media do that to him, even though he should be.
Yeah, and that's my issue with the mainstream media. They keep handling Donald Trump with kid gloves,
Yeah.
and they treat him with so much more respect and everything than they did Joe Biden and even Kamala Harris. If they would have treated him as bad as he deserved to be treated and just talked about the truth, you know, this outcome of this election would have been 10 times different. Even
Yeah.
Fox News should have been saying, hey, look, we like Donald Trump, but come on now. If they had an ounce of credibility, even they would be saying, come on now, he's bad. But credibility went out the window a long time ago.
The question I have was with the media, with Fox News, with the left side media. They keep propping this dipshit up. We all can see that this is not going to go well for Donald Trump or for the country. And when it does take a shit, how do they cover their ass? I mean, they were culpable in him getting there and being there, and they were trying to suggest that he knew what he's talking about. And then when everything goes to hell, I'll be honest with you, I hope he does something stupid as quickly as possible, like a tariff. It won't last very long, but I hope he does something stupid to affect the economy quickly. Because if he doesn't, he's just going to do what he did with Obama's economy, ride that wave, and he's going to claim he's a fucking hero, that he's a genius. I hope he does something stupid as quickly as possible so we can get that road going downhill as soon as possible.
I think he's going to do that very quickly. There's a lot of stuff he says he wants to start working on day one. Um, and I think they will. He will try to do some of this stuff. Now, whether or not there's pushback from Congress, there probably will be for some of the most egregious stuff. And then he's going to have to
Yeah.
go out and start talking about members of Congress that just got voted in and calling them rhinos and everything else because they're not loyal to him. But I think he's going to do something that is going to wreck the economy rather quickly because he's an idiot.
Yeah.
He doesn't
Yeah.
know what a lot of what he's talking about, but he likes to be the smartest person in the room. or he tells everybody he's the smartest person in the room.
Yeah, and apparently some people fucking believe it. You know, I'm getting a feeling a lot of people are expecting much the same in the second term that we saw in Donald Trump in the first term. And I think in terms of him and his stupidity and his ridiculous things and his behavior, it is going to be the same. But I think it's going to be a little different. And I want to see what you think about this. When he first came in, people didn't know what to expect. I think people around the world kind of were a little nervous about the situation. He seemed like a wild card. He might fucking do anything. But if you're looking at other leaders around the country, it's not the same. When we look at Mexico, when we look at Canada, when we look at some of the other countries around the world, there's a unanimous disrespect for this guy. And I think the fear is a little less out of these leaders because they know he's a clown. And without that fear aspect, that's the one thing that he depends on in order to try to be successful. While they might be fearful of some crazy thing that he might do that might impact their country, they have no respect for him. They think he's silly. They think he's a fool. They think we're foolish for electing him. I don't think he's going to have an easy time pushing people around internationally anymore.
No, he's really not. Um, and because, like you said, they think he's a fool. They know what he's like. They've dealt with him before,
Right.
and he's played his one. Uh, and I hate this expression, but his one trump card,
Yeah.
and they've seen it. They know what he's got in his hand at this point. Now it's how crazy is he going to be this next term? Maybe crazier, maybe stupider. Um, because he's latched onto some ideas that he didn't have before.
Right.
And all of the people that were around him that were kind of sane are mostly gone. But, and the Trumpers hate it when I say this, but he's also a lame duck.
Absolutely.
He will be a lame duck as of 12 noon, January 20th, the minute he takes the oath of office, because he can't run again.
He can't run again. And we talked about that earlier. A lot of people think he can run again. He cannot. He'd have to change an amendment, and he doesn't have the wherewithal or the power to do it. And I don't think anybody in Congress, Republican or otherwise, has any interest in giving him that option, especially since he's going to be 4 years older if he's alive at all. Um, but but I think that he's going to try to behave the same way and try to pull the same power plays that he did the first time around because he still thinks he's the most powerful guy. But we've talked about this before, and this is my personal opinion. I think you share that opinion. I think Donald Trump's value to the Republican Party has been played out. They needed him to get the presidency and get the Republicans in the House and Senate. I still don't know how they accomplished that. But now that he's there, I see him as a liability. All he can do is make the Republicans look bad or foolish or like failures. And I got to think the Republicans, as soon as he gets inaugurated, they're going to think, how can we get out of this?
Yeah, and I've been talking about it in my lives. I said they're going to deal with him as long as they can. But the minute he starts, maybe not the minute, but when it's very obvious that he is wrecking their reelection chances in 26, that he is destroying their credibility potentially for a generation as a party, he's going to bring it to a point when he leaves them no choice, but they are going to have to remove him one way or another. Now, whether that's the 25th Amendment with J.D. Vance and congressional Republicans talk to Vance and say, hey, look, you got to do this. You bring the 25th. We'll back you. Make it happen. Or whether they just say on their own, we got to impeach this fucker and he's got to go. And this could be maybe the beginning of old school politics again, of bipartisan politics. Because if things are bad enough, if they bring up an impeachment vote, if they bring up a 25th Amendment vote in Congress, the Democrats are going to vote out Trump in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So maybe it's something where they're all working behind the scenes going, hey, look, you bring it up, we back it. Make sure you have enough of your people to make it happen. If you can guarantee us your people are all on board, You got all of our votes. We're in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's distinctly possible, and I hate to say this, but if there's no other route, we are talking about the Republicans. And I would not be surprised about a violent attempt to take him out, make him a martyr so they still have some cachet with the memory of Trump, and they can play the martyrs and they can blame whoever, and they can still go off because if they impeach him, that's going to make the Republicans look bad, and that's going to taint Donald Trump's legacy, obviously. So I don't know. There'll be Republicans that are happy. There will be Republicans that are sad. I hate to say that violence is an option, but there's already been two attempts on his life, and they've both been Republicans. So I don't know. I'm concerned
Yeah,
about that because I don't want to see that happen. I honestly don't want to see Donald Trump injured or attacked or assassinated. I don't want to see that because that only benefits him, his legacy, and his memory.
yeah. Um, I don't want to see that either. I don't know if that, I don't want to ever say it couldn't happen because anything's possible. Um, but I think ultimately they're going to have to weigh how much they care about hurting his legacy versus
Yeah.
their own reelection chances. Because here's the thing, if he is wrecking the economy to that point where they have to stand up to him, kind of like, I know it wasn't the economy, but kind of like the Republicans did against Nixon and Watergate. Okay, you
Right.
crossed a major line. We have to stand against you here. And the Republican Party came out okay with it. They didn't really get any backlash. Now, I realize Nixon wasn't held up to near the level of Trump, but if they have to do what's right, they're otherwise he's going to take them all down, and you could end up. I keep mentioning it, but like Democrats with Herbert Hoover after Herbert Hoover was president, Democrats had control of Congress and the presidency for 20 years
Yeah.
because of how bad he wrecked the economy leading into the Great Depression. And
And we
Republicans are probably going to be worried about that.
and we have to be careful what we say because you and I and a lot of people were saying the same things after the 2020 election. Donald Trump will never get elected because he'll tear down the Republican Party, which he did. Then he might tear down the system, which he's in the process of doing. But still, somehow they held on to this. They felt like they needed him to win the 2024 election, and damned if it didn't work. But if there was a time to cut bait and try to start something better, it would have been after the 2020 election, but they didn't. So it's hard to say what they would actually do in this situation. You don't think they'd ride it out for 4 years and just let them fucking bury them, do you?
I would hope not. I mean, but you talked about 2020. The time to cut bait after the 2020 election, as you put it, was Mitch McConnell during his second impeachment. Mitch McConnell rallied the troops and said, okay, we're going to vote to save him because he's no longer president. When they held the vote on his impeachment and said, okay, we'll save him, we'll save his legacy, but then we'll let him go slink off to Mar-a-Lago and he'll go be a nothing and he'll stay out of the limelight. We'll let him go. And they assumed Merrick Garland and the DOJ would do something, and the
Yeah.
Democrats would have to save him. So maybe the Democrats are going to, maybe they'll write it for 2 years till Democrats gain a big enough majority in both chambers, and they force the Democrats to clean up their mess.
Well, that sounds about their speed to do it that way. And this has always been my frustration after this election is I hate the Republicans. They're trying to destroy the country, overturn elections, undermine democracy, and do all that shit. But goddamn, the Democrats, I don't have a lot of confidence in them either. And I'm sorry to say that, but based on what we saw in this election and how they handled Donald Trump's investigations and indictments and that sort of stuff, the the Democrats had done everything to step on their own dicks for the last 4 years, and it's frustrating. I mean, they had it. You've got the worst possible candidate for president, and you drop the fucking ball. How do you do that?
Yeah, because they can't get out of their own damn way.
True.
You had
True.
one bad debate with Joe Biden, and then at least enough of Democrats got in the right ears of the right people in the media to keep it out and in the story for 3 damn weeks. And they forced Joe Biden to step aside and pretty much tank their own chances. They should have let it play out and let Joe Biden run. Now, Kamala Harris
Well,
ran a great campaign. I'm not
yeah.
faulting her, but the Democrats got in their own damn way and they drug him through the mud. And then, so he did, okay, I'm out. You guys clearly don't want me anymore. Top leadership is saying I need to go. Okay, I'm done. Kamala Harris runs. She ran a
Right.
great campaign, but they didn't get out of their own damn way. And then you had Democratic advisors to Kamala Harris after she gets Liz Cheney's endorsement, campaigning her around with Liz Cheney for weeks leading up to the election, and they lost all of the left-leaning voters.
Yeah.
One thing I've been saying is, and this isn't a knock on Joe Biden, because I said this during that 3 week period when they were asking, should Joe step aside? And I said to those Democrats that think Joe needs to step aside now because he's unfit to be president in 6 months, because he might not make it 4 years, but he's unfit in 6 months, then you're saying he's unfit now because
Right.
6 months really isn't that long. I think it would have been better potentially for Kamala Harris in the presidency if Joe Biden would have resigned, citing health, and made her president and let her run as the incumbent.
Right. That would have
I
helped.
think that would have solved a lot of people's hesitance about her. But for the people that can't see that this is essentially the same thing, that's scary a little bit for the Democrats. They get in their own damn way.
Well, they do. I mean, they got all crazy after Joe Biden had a rough debate, and they jumped on board. He's got to go. We're going to lose because of the debate, because of this, because of that. But I'll remind folks that Kamala Harris kicked Donald Trump's ass in the last debate, and it obviously didn't have any impact on the election. Um, I played around with this for a while. I'm curious as to what you think. I think you and I were both feeling pretty strongly when it was down to whether or not Joe Biden should step aside. I think we both thought that wasn't a good idea. I kind of changed my mind when I saw the momentum behind Kamala Harris. But there were a lot of things we didn't factor in, that the Democrats would step on their own dick, that racism and sexism was going to play a bigger role. What do you think would have happened if they said, okay, hit a bad debate, but Joe's still strong and we're going to do this, and he ran anyway? Is the sexism and the racism bad enough where Joe could have still won because he was the incumbent and because he was an old white guy?
Unfortunately, I think yes. I think he would have won.
I tend to think that too, as crazy as
And
that might sound.
not just because of the racism or the sexism, but in part, you had people who refused to vote for Donald Trump that were going to vote for RFK.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he would have stayed in the race if Joe Biden stayed in.
Yeah.
Well, then you would have had people who didn't vote. The people who were going to vote for RFK when he backed Trump, I didn't think it was going to be that big of a switch. But I don't think any of them switched over to voting for Kamala. I think they
Yeah.
all switched to Trump. They went back to Donald Trump. So I think that would have helped. I think just the continued leadership coming from Joe would have been good. And the idea of just continuing the same president, even though, yes, she was his VP, the just continue of leadership and the economy's doing okay, we won't rock the boat, I think would have worked. And then Joe Biden wouldn't have listened to advisors telling him to spend 3 weeks running around with Liz Cheney.
Yeah. That
He would
was
have
a
said,
dumb
get out of
move.
here with that shit.
That to me seemed a little greedy because they felt like they had the Democrats locked up. So they wanted to pull some Republicans, which they didn't need to do to win, but they wanted to pull some Republicans. So they aligned her with Liz Cheney. As I've told people before, Liz Cheney You got to appreciate her integrity and standing up to Donald Trump, but she is a Republican. She's a very conservative Republican. There is no Democrat in the right mind that would vote for Liz Cheney. You don't want to align yourself with that, hoping to get Republican votes, because clearly every time we've been in that situation where we think Republicans in the House or the Senate or in elections, some are going to side with us because Donald Trump is too fucking crazy. They never do. They always go in line with the party. So we got to learn a lesson out of that and fucking not make that mistake again.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the lesson too many people are taking away from this is, well, can't run a woman anymore. Oh, can't run a woman. Gotta run a dude. Gotta run a man. Gotta run a man. No, the problem in part was she was spent too long with this Cheney, and I think she was given bad advice, which is where
Well,
I
and she
think Joe
and
Biden
she
wouldn't have fallen into that trap.
well no, and you can't expect much more out of her for having a basically 90 or 100-day campaign. Let me ask you this. If Joe Biden stuck to his guns and said, I'm going to be a transition president, I'm not going to run in 2024, and he stood by that in 2020, and they had 4 years to build up a candidate, whether that be Kamala or anybody else, I think that would have made a huge difference too. And I'm not trying to fault Joe Biden. I understand why he did what he did, but they needed more time than 90 days. And that was one of the things you and I were concerned about. They kept saying, Joe's got to step aside. Joe's got to step aside. And we kept saying there's not enough time. Well, they made hay while the sun shines, and they did a good job, but there still wasn't enough time.
One of the things I pointed out in a TikTok way back then in July when they were talking about Joe Biden stepping aside, I said, we're at July. We're up against the deadline where they have to get a name certified for uh, DNC to be on the ballot in all the states because a couple Republican states were not willing to give grant extensions out to the DNC. So we couldn't have some sort of a competition at the DNC committee, none of that. Okay. But then I said, look back to history. You had March of 68.
Right.
What happened? LBJ steps aside, says, okay, you know what? I'm not running. I'm done. I don't want to go for another term. I could, but I'm not. Well, all the negative about LBJ transfers on to Humphrey, his VP,
Hubert
who
Humphrey. Right.
ran the rest of that race. And every negative about the economy, Vietnam, all of it would transfer to Humphrey. And I said,
Right.
I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I said, I hope not. But, because the only negative thing I could think of that Joe Biden, uh, they couldn't move to Kamala Harris would be his age.
Right.
And that's the thing. They weren't able to do that. Although Donald Trump tried, he tried to use the same strategies about, well, she's cognitively not there, she's old, all that kind of stuff, but it didn't work. Um,
No.
but Democrats did this in 68. They tried it with Humphrey and LBJ. It failed. Here you come, what, 50 years later, 55 years later, do it again, this time in July, and it failed. The only way having Joe step out of the race when he did in July probably would have worked is if he would have resigned at the same time. But because he
Right.
stayed in as president, too much of the negative carried from him to her. And people were upset about their day to day economy. And while she was out saying the economy's good, the economy's strong, unemployment numbers and big picture economy was great. They were
Right.
missing the mark with individual economy.
Right.
And she had plans for all of it, but there was so much in her message that didn't get through nearly well enough.
Well, and there was part of what the Republicans did over this campaign that, for as silly and as egregious as it is, it was effective. Was all the negative finger pointing, the blaming of Joe Biden for fucking everything. I mean, they had hearings over and over about his um, bribery, the money he took from Ukraine and Hunter and all this stuff. And they had hearings and they kept saying, oh my God, we know he's guilty. We don't have any evidence right now, but we're going to keep digging and we're going to find him. Now, this is a story that happened the other day, and I don't know that many people paid attention to it, but all that talk about Joe Biden taking a bribe and Hunter Biden doing all those sorts of things. Um, there is a FBI informant by the name of Alexander Smirnov. A couple days ago, he admitted that he lied about the whole thing. And now that motherfucker's going to jail for 4 to 6 years. So they carried the narrative on something that was fully a lie. And the Republicans knew it was a lie. And that was part of the damage inflicted on Joe Biden and indirectly Kamala Harris because of a completely made up fucking story.
Yeah, and he had already been charged like a year and a half ago with for lying to the FBI over making up that story. So now I'm guessing he
Right.
pled guilty.
Right.
Um, but they carried the narrative. Democrats are horrible messengers. We
They
talked
still
about it.
do.
Oh
They
yeah,
still talk about it.
yeah. And Democrats are horrible messengers. We talked about it. I think the last time I was on the podcast, Joe Biden should have been having weekly fireside chats like FDR did, talking about the state of the economy, talking about all the good things that his administration accomplished, make it a podcast, put it out there, and done something, crowed about what he all did. But Democrats like to let their achievements stand on its own, and they let Republicans control the narrative all the damn time.
Well, and, that's kind of the point I made after the election. I said there's a couple things we've got to do. If we want to stop the shit that Donald Trump wants to do, we have to do exactly what the Republicans did and obstruct and block everything we fucking possibly can using the filibuster and or the divisiveness in the House. We've got to do that. But based on any upcoming election, whether it be 26 or 2028, we've got to somehow figure out the Democrats to control the narrative. We've got to blame Donald Trump for everything. And he should
Mm-hmm.
get the blame for everything since he's got all this power for at least 2 years. We need to finger point. We need to talk loud. We need to do exactly what the Republicans did. And whether it's something you can't stomach, it doesn't matter. The fucker worked. So we need to employ that tactic going forward. I hope the Democrats are able to do that. But if nothing else, people like you and I will be talking loud about it.
Yeah, we have to.
Yeah,
We have to control that message. And that's the problem. Democrats always want their messaging. They want to do it like it did in the 50s, 60s, 70s,
yeah.
and let their achievements accomplish what they did or stand for themselves, and then go, well, the news is going to report what we did, and it's going to be all, they're going to report it factually. That's gone. That era is gone. And in part, you know, one of the things that Democrats need to do going into 26 and into 28 is we need younger blood running for Democratic positions, especially
Absolutely.
in strongholds, in Democratic strongholds, places where 100% without a doubt that you could run a ham sandwich under the Democratic banner and they will win because they're a Democrat. Republicans do that shit. Why don't we? But no, instead we run people like Nancy Pelosi in San Francisco. You're telling me you can't find somebody 25 to 40 that could run in San Francisco as a Democrat? I guarantee you
Yeah.
anybody could run. And this isn't a knock on Nancy Pelosi, but they're still stuck in the old guard ways. They need to, like, she did great for her time, but we have to adapt to the new times. You
Well,
have, go ahead.
no, the Democrats keep doing it to themselves. Here's a story that came out yesterday, or the day before. The House Democrat Steering and Policy Committee voted to recommend Jerry Conley, old white guy, Democrat from Virginia, as ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. Uh, and it was a huge blow to Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. She hoped to be in that position. Now, I'm not saying Jerry Conley is not qualified for it, but you should be looking to the future. You don't need a 65, 70-year-old white man running this if we're going to try to go with a youth movement. Alexandria
Right.
Ocasio Cortez is a very bright woman, and she for all intents and purposes, is part of the future of the Democratic Party. Jerry Conley is just riding out fucking retirement. Like I say, I'm not faulting him at
Right.
all and not saying that he's not good. But if we're going to go youthful, let's go fucking youthful. And the Democrats themselves in Congress did this. That was stupid.
Well, and that's kind of my issue, like with Adam Schiff switching to the Senate to run
Yeah.
in for Feinstein's seat. Isn't Schiff like in his 60s
Yeah.
versus Katie Porter, who's younger? Wasn't she? Isn't she younger than him by a little bit?
Yeah. And they pretty much gamed that system. I mean, Nancy Pelosi wanted him to take that position. So she, she's got all the angles and all the leverage, and basically handed it to him because he was up against Steve Garvey, and that fucking clown could never win. Um, they keep wanting to go back to the old guard, and the old guard is why they fucking lost.
Yeah. I mean, Adam Schiff, nothing against him, done great in the House, but we had an opportunity to pick up somebody young. We could have kept Schiff's seat and Katie Porter's seat in the House. Now I don't know if
Yeah.
if either seat flipped. I don't know. I guess I didn't check it that close.
I'm not sure
But
either.
instead, we took two people out of the House to replace one senator in a state where you could almost guarantee a Democrat could run. They could have run a younger person as a Democrat and had a longer chance to do something. But instead, we've got these old fossils out there who won't give up the levers of power to younger people, but they're the ones making decisions when it's not going to affect them for much longer. You have Dianne Feinstein, who died while in office at 91 years old and didn't know where she was part of the time. And this isn't
No,
even
she
this
didn't.
isn't even a knock on her legacy. But multiple times she was supposed to be there to vote on legislation. All she had to say was yay or nay. That's it. And she would start debating the bill when it was her turn to talk. Didn't know where she was, and her daughter had to get power of attorney to control her money. At what point do
Well,
they
she
say,
was still
okay,
her daughter needed power of attorney while she was still voting in the Senate. That's fucking
yes,
ridiculous.
yes, because they didn't want to give up the old guard. And in part, both parties do it when you got somebody like a Feinstein, like a Grassley, like a Pelosi who says, I'm running again. Nobody in the party challenges it. Nobody says, hey, you know what? Your time's up. Let somebody else take over. Nobody pushes against them
Well, Nancy
because they
Pelosi
want
is
that
over.
incumbency.
Yeah, yeah. It's all about their personal power. Nancy Pelosi's over in Europe. She's like 84, 85, 86 years old, or whatever the fuck she is. She's in her 80s. And she's over there and she falls and breaks a hip. That sounds like a red flag to maybe retire. I mean, Nancy
Yeah.
Pelosi did a great job while she was in there, but toward the end, she made some bad choices with regards to Joe Biden. She probably lost a lifelong friend in Joe Biden. Step aside. Let somebody else do this shit.
Now, if it was a different situation, and say she was in Joe Manchin's position, where she she had won in deep red West Virginia,
Yeah,
right? I could see keeping her around because, okay, deep red West Virginia.
right.
You're not likely to get a Democrat in West Virginia. Okay, I can see that. She represents San Francisco.
Yeah,
It's
you're
one
going to
of the
get a
safest
Democrat.
blue districts in California. She's
Right.
fine. Let her retire. She should retire, but none of the powers that be go up to Adam, and both parties do it. They don't say, "Hey, you know what? It's time for you guys to go. We need younger. You need to let go of the levers of power." And TJ brings up in my lives a lot. He's always talking about we need because somebody will say term limits. He says age limits, not term limits.
I
Because
agree.
term limits say, let's say you say 2 terms as senator. Well, that's true. That's 12 years. But if you get in at 35, you're only 47 and you're out of office. You might have 20 more years where you could do something, and experience matters. I see his point. But say you get to 65 or 70, you're just automatically like, once you cross that threshold, you're out.
Yeah.
You're done. And that should be a good idea. Problem is that takes changing the Constitution, and that takes Congress to change the Constitution, and they're not going to vote themselves out of office.
No, they're not going to vote themselves out of office. That's why when everybody says, all we need is term limits, cool. I agree with you. But Congress themselves has to determine that, and age limits too. We should have those same age limits, if not term limits, in the Supreme Court as well. We got 85-year-old people dying in the hallways that are Supreme Court justices. Once again, making decisions that will have a significant effect on this country. And if we don't even know that they have their wits about them, fuck, that's ridiculous.
Well, we got the TikTok ban coming up before the Supreme Court at some point here soon. I'm assuming they're going to take the case and they're going to hear this TikTok ban. Now, what they decide, that's anybody's guess. But
Yeah.
looking at it, you have, what is it? Is it Sotomayor, Roberts, Alito, and Thomas are all 70 plus?
Yeah.
70 plus. Do they, I'm sure they use technology. I'm not going to say that. But are they nearly as familiar with technology and how it works, et cetera, and what all of that means as somebody 30, 40 years younger than them? Probably not. And that's a problem. You have people in Congress like a Nancy Pelosi or a Chuck Grassley who are 80 to 90 plus making laws about technology. Chuck Grassley turned 18 in the 50s. The first school shooting happened in Columbine in, was it 96 or 97?
Yeah. Yeah.
Something like that, maybe 98. He would have been roughly in his 50s, if not early 60s. He has no idea what these young people go through every day at school. And he's the one making laws when he's not even going to live probably 10 more years to see them implemented.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
we have to do something about all of the old people making the decisions. From president on down, Congress, Supreme Court, their era is gone. It is rapidly changing. I'm not even sure I understand what school age kids go through now, and I've only been out of high school a little under 25 years. It
Yeah.
has changed that much.
Well, just the other day, we had this school shooting in uh, Madison, Wisconsin. It was a Catholic school, K-12. A couple people were killed, including the shooter. And the shooter was a 15-year-old girl. How is that shit happening? And we've got 70, 80, 90-year-old people making decisions on what we should do with guns. Fuck, they were hunting squirrels for dinner when they were 18. They don't know what the fuck they were doing. And then we got people that can't even procreate anymore deciding about abortion. The whole thing is just silly. It's absurd.
Oh, it's very absurd. It's very absurd. Although I think one of your other guests brought it up too. Whenever we talk about the abortion issue, I'm always reminded of the late, great George Carlin. And when he's talking about the abortion issue in one of his bits, he always goes, have you ever noticed that the people, these pro-life motherfuckers, the really hardcore pro-life motherfuckers, they're the people you wouldn't want to fuck anyway?
And they're
But
probably not capable. Yeah.
but yeah, you're talking about the ones that are really hardcore. Like you just said, they're not capable of having kids. It's their kids, in some cases, grandkids that are in that era. Hell, for Chuck Grassley, it's probably his great grandkids at this point because he's
Yeah.
90 fucking one. So
But
why are these old people making the laws when they're so far out of touch? It's unreal.
the question is we can see it. Most people can see it. But do the Democrats do anything about it? Do they try to? I mean, let's be honest. The Democrats lost in 2024 that was an opportunity to sweep that motherfucker. With all the bad that Donald Trump and the Republicans have done over the last 8 years, this was an opportunity to win the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and they should have done it, but they failed. I think it's clear that they've got to change a lot about that Democratic Party. But the question is, will they do it, or will they still keep doing the same shit they've done for decades?
It really depends who they start listening to. Um, Andy Bashir out of Kentucky, the Democratic governor who won in a red state twice, has been elected to the to lead the Democratic Governors Conference or whatever it's called to help get more Democratic governors elected in 26 in the midterms.
Right.
And one of the things he talked about is you need to start going after kitchen table issues, better living wages, health care. Effectively, he said it in a different way, but he effectively said what I've been saying: run on a New Deal style message. And if they listen to somebody like him and they get somebody younger in that listens to him, they could win. Problem is, are they going to spend time listening to him, or are they going to listen to old school Democratic leadership? Your people like Nancy Pelosi. You know, Joe
Well,
Biden's probably not going to have a role in this anymore because he's going to.
no,
If I was Joe Biden, I wouldn't want to have anything to do with the Democrats after this. I would serve out my term, and if they ask me for my input or my advice, I tell them to go fuck themselves.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, the thing about it is what the Democrats have to understand, and I've come to understand in the last 6, 8 months. It's fine to say the economy is great if the stock market is up and the GDP is up and manufacturing is up and unemployment is down. That's all good signs that the economy is good. But what young people in this country are experiencing, they got heavy debt for college loans. They get out, they get jobs that don't pay them enough to survive. They can't buy housing, they can't afford anything, plus they're in debt. The economy is great, generally speaking, but for those young people, the economy sucks. And I got that because my son told me that. He says the economy sucks. And I go, where do you get that from? And then we sat and talked about it for a while. I go, you're fucking right. These Democrats are leaving young people behind. What's going on
Mm-hmm.
financially with young people is far worse than what I experienced when I was young. And as a 64-year-old guy, I guess I didn't see it because I'm living my life doing what I'm doing. But when I look and see what these young people are dealing with, it's pretty fucked. They're behind the eight ball on this thing, and the Democrats need to show some sense of actually doing something about it instead of crowing about, well, it's pretty good for the upper middle class and the rich people, because that's really what that
Yeah.
affects.
Well, I was talking to a coworker of mine a couple days ago, actually, and we were talking. Well, I was actually talking about like at what point throughout doing all my videos and stuff would be what I would consider like a break-even point to pay my mortgage. And she goes, "Well, that's less than what I pay for my rent." And we were
Right.
talking for a little bit, and she goes, she pays over $1,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment for rent. And we were talking about it, and she goes, the dumb thing? She goes, I don't have the credit history or the current work history because I've had to jump 3 different jobs in 2 years, 3 or 4 jobs in 2 years minimum, to always going for a better pay rate.
Right.
Um, but I don't have the work history. I don't have the credit history now for a bank to approve me for a house. They'll say I'm not a good
Right.
credit risk for $1,000 mortgage, but I'm paying $1,000 every month for an apartment.
Right.
And that's part of the problem. And then you have Democrats saying, "Oh, the economy's pretty good." No, it
Yeah.
fucking sucks. And in that context,
Yeah, it depends on where you're looking at, where you are, and what you're looking at. And I had to open my eyes a little bit because for me, I'm fine, but I'm retired. I have a pension. I have Social Security. I'm not getting rich up in here, but I'm comfortable and I'm fine. But these young kids aren't comfortable, and we have to address that situation not only for their sake, but for the sake of this country. because we're dying off. We're comfortable. We can pay things and we're dying off. If your whole economy is based on people that can't afford to fucking survive or buy houses, the value of houses goes down and our economy goes to shit. That's why this needs to be addressed. And the Democrats need to get the thumb out of their ass and address that. That's how they're going to get reelected.
That, and I think one of the things that came up in the live I did right before this podcast, we got talking, especially with TJ in there, about pensions
Yeah,
and how pensions are basically gone. They're a thing of
absolutely.
the past unless you're in a union job. And that's thanks to Reagan. Reagan
Right.
found the 401k in the tax code, which was, I mean, it was already kind of there, and convinced all these employers to go to 401ks instead of a pension because it put
Right.
all the burden on the employer or on the employee. It put everything that way, and then they didn't have to fund these pension plans. I worked for a company for 19 years. Now, 16 of it was full time, roughly. Now, depending on how they counted my employment, if I only would have had to put in one more year, and if I would have had a pension sitting there, I would have dealt with the bullshit of not getting paid enough, um, at the time and said, okay, well, you know what? I got one more year to work it out, or I got
Right.
2 more years to work it out, whatever. And then I get a full pension and I can, you know, retire
Yeah.
technically from you and you will keep paying me every month. Okay, I'm in. And they would have gotten good work out of me. I wouldn't have gone looking for a different job that paid me way better per hour.
Yeah.
But instead, they went, well, we're going to pay you low wages. Oh, you got your 401k. Well, there wasn't a lot in that 401k, not nearly what a pension would have paid me. And I found something different and I booked it. And there's no more loyalty to employees because they found a
No.
way around to save a little bit of taxes, they found a way around the pensions.
Yeah. And that lack of loyalty to employees is starting to bite them in the ass too. You've got more jobs than you do have employees, especially in the lower end jobs, place where they're taking advantage of folks. And now they want to deport immigrants. We could be in a bad situation. This is why I think, as much as they wanted Donald Trump in, these corporations are going to say, well, wait, hold on a second. You're going to fuck up our business if you start shipping out 18 million people. I don't honestly believe he's going to do that because it's too complex to pull that off and too expensive. But I got to think these young people, it's really not going to change their lives if the economy goes to shit for the middle class and the rich people. They're just going to start to experience the things they've been experiencing all along.
Well, yeah, but what's going to happen? It's going to depend in part, how the Democrats respond to it. And if they run a candidate on fixing all of the issues, that would be number one. But if they can put the blame squarely on, okay, it was this level of shitty before, and now it jumped way up because of that
Yeah.
motherfucker and Donald Trump and the Republican Party, they could lose a lot of young Republican voters for a generation, a
Yeah.
couple of generations. Um, and then you're going to have to come in. The only maybe good thing, and that's if employers react to it. I don't know if they will. Typically, when unemployment's low and you have people fighting for jobs, wages go up.
Right.
Typically.
Yeah.
So if you pull 20 million people out of the workforce, at least in some areas and some industries, wages are going to go up. So that could be a benefit. But then again, you got somebody like a Donald Trump who won't put regulations in place. So therefore, everything else goes up right along with it, and you're not much better off.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to bring something up as we're coming to the end here. Everybody says Donald Trump's not going to be accountable. We'll see what happens with the Manhattan District and the sentencing. That'll be intriguing to see what happens. But Donald Trump also asked Letitia James to dismiss his lawsuit, which he already lost. And people will say, well, Donald Trump will never pay anything. And that's just not true. The E. Jean Carroll case, for example. he had to post a bond of $90 million to E. Jean Carroll. That money's already come out of his pocket. We're waiting on the appeal, which he will lose. And when he loses that appeal, that money will go from that account to E. Jean Carroll. So he took that $90 million bite. He's also got a bond with regards to the Letitia James thing. And he's trying to get out of that, but there's going to be no way of doing that. Of course, he appealed it and he'll lose that appeal. So Donald Trump's going to take a pretty serious financial hit. He's already taken a financial hit because he's had to post these bonds. But Donald Trump is not going to go into this presidency unaccountable for everything. They are still going to stick it to him for some things.
Yeah. And, um, even if the appeal doesn't go through, like he loses that appeal for the Letitia James case, his bond is only like 175 million.
Right.
Last time I checked, his total due was like 450 to 475, somewhere in that
Exactly.
ballpark and growing. So
And
he's
he'll
going to have
have
to
to
come up
come
with
up with
an,
that.
or he's going to start losing properties. And could you
Right.
imagine like how devastating to him the uh like the loss of some of his golf courses, because they said they were going to go after him. The loss of Mar-a-Lago would be if they went and they seized Mar-a-Lago. Um, Now Mar-a-Lago ain't going to be worth shit because he owned it, not
Right.
nearly what it probably would have been if anybody else had owned it. Um, but then he's going to do something unhinged. He's going to react. He's going to try to send the DOJ after Letitia James, or try to send somebody to go prevent them from seizing his properties, or something completely stupid. And then somebody's going to have to step in. Republicans may have to do it, or something. So he's going to be held accountable. He's going to have to come up with the money. And then depending on his reaction, because it's going to be bad, to losing the money and or property, Republicans may be left with no choice but to deal with it.
Right. Well, and the thing about it is with Donald Trump, the biggest problem in this whole situation is the absolute embarrassment of it. And that's where kind of where you and I come in and everybody else comes in, just start hammering him over the embarrassment of losing $500 million. This brilliant businessman lost 90 million to E.G. Carroll, 90 million to E.G. Carroll, and 450 to Letitia James. You got to keep pounding on him because when you tease somebody who's a narcissist, the embarrassment is the absolute worst price they can pay. He'll just lose his shit. And when he loses his shit, he's going to make a lot of mistakes.
Oh yeah. And he's very, very reactionary in
Oh,
that
yeah.
he reacts to whatever's currently on his mind. So if day two of his presidency, he has to pay E. Jean Carroll, and the appeals finally go through, and they say, okay, she gets the money. He's going to come out, he's going to defame her again. And in the process, then there'll be another lawsuit, which may get held up until after he's out of office, but whatever. He'll get sued again. And then when the lawsuit's filed, he'll react, he'll defame her again. And then when Letitia James comes out, he'll do something unhinged. He doesn't think, everyone says he's playing 3D chess or he's playing like some ridiculous long game. No, he literally reacts. I did a TikTok um, about businesses and CEOs getting very uh, concerned about his um, tariffs and stuff, about his economic policies. And in that little TikTok I did, they were talking about, or I was talking about, how not only are the CEOs getting nervous, but apparently they're reaching out to like the Trump team advisors, and his advisors are going, don't
What
know,
the fuck?
because he wakes up at 2, 3, 4 a.m., whenever he's sending out these things on social media. He's not talking to anybody. He's reacting to whatever popped into his brain in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And that's how he's doing stuff. He's not listening to anybody. He's not running anything by people. And that's how his entire presidency is going to be. It's going to be insanity.
Well, and you were talking about the lawsuits and you don't know what's going to happen. He's got other lawsuits against him. Eric Swalwell, a lot of people have lawsuits against him. And some people might think that he gets a pause on it because he's president. If I remember correctly, this question was answered back during the Bill Clinton days. The woman that charged him with that, whatever, they took it to court as to whether she could sue him or not, and she won. So even though he was president, he could still be sued.
Paula Jones,
Paula Jones, exactly.
because that was the
So
whole thing. He got he had to get oh God, what's the word? He deposed. He had to get deposed in the Paula Jones case, and that's where he lied
right,
about the affair with Monica Lewinsky that they impeached him over. It was all part of that civil suit.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
And
it's been
so
answered.
maybe that's what we need to do is just file lawsuit after lawsuit. And we're getting close to the end here, but I bring that up because he was asked a question at that press conference he did. Are you going to go after media outlets and influencers? And he said, yeah, I could definitely sue him for defamation. And somebody asked me, are you worried about that? Fuck no. Let him sue me. Let him, everything I got's put in my kids' names, first of all. Secondly, you can't be sued for defamation if you told the truth, and I can prove the truth. Thirdly, if you're a celebrity, it's even harder to sue somebody for defamation of character. And if it's a big enough thing, I guarantee you some powerful attorney will take that on pro bono for the publicity, and then we'll just countersue him for suing me. It's I
Yeah.
hope he sues me. I hope he fucking sues me. That
I
would be
mean,
awesome. My channel will blow the fuck up.
oh yeah, let him come after me. The biggest what is it? The answer to a defamation case is the truth. And me showing that he doesn't know shit about shit. Okay, he doesn't know what a tariff is. He doesn't know this. He doesn't know this. He doesn't know this. I can prove it based on his own words. Let him try. I wouldn't need nearly the amount of money that my attorney, whoever I would get, same boat as you, some high-powered attorney would probably come in to represent me. And they'd get a big cut. I'd get enough to pay off my house, probably never have to work again. And I could just spend the rest of my days hammering on the legacy of Donald Trump and
Exactly.
be fine.
Well, and it's important to remember when somebody asks me like this, I said, remember, all the lawsuits Donald Trump claimed he was going to do or did do, how many did he win? None. The only win
Yeah.
he got was with ABC, and they could have won that easily, but they bended the knee, essentially gave him a bribe of $15 million for future considerations. That's all they fucking did.
Yeah, it was 15 million. It was a minor. They could have probably won for several hundred million. Instead, they pay him 15, and it keeps them off his radar for a while because they were on his radar because of the debate performance, the bad debate performance that he himself had. It was his
Yeah,
fault, but he was going to make it their problem.
right. And the thing about it is, well, the other part of it was too that apparently George Stephanopoulos said that he was adjudicated for rape. Now, the official term was sexual assault in the lawsuit, but the judge came out and said this is essentially rape. So Stephanopoulos was just repeating what the judge said, and it was
Yeah.
legitimate and it was true because it fell under the qualifications of rape in the state of New York. But they just folded on that. If I was George Stephanopoulos, I would be pissed
Yeah, I would be too. But they
because
did it because he wanted to go after him because of the bad debate performance he had.
and the only thing Donald Trump wanted out of this thing, he didn't care about well, he probably cared about the $15 million. He just wanted to claim victory and be right. That was the big thing for him. And use that as leverage to terrorize whoever else he was going to claim to sue. Like I say, sue me, motherfucker. I would love it.
Yeah, me too. But bring it on. I would love to get my house paid off by Donald Trump free and clear.
I've already made some money off of Donald Trump the last 4 years. I'll be happy to take a little more off that motherfucker. I don't care. Well, I'm going to wrap things up, Eric. I appreciate you coming on. It was a pleasure to have you on as always. You need to check out what Eric's doing on TikTok and YouTube, Analytical Iowan. He does a lot of lives. They're always informative and entertaining. You definitely want to check it out on TikTok. Do you record the lives too and put them on YouTube?
Yep, I do.
Okay, good, good.
And I do that. I'm still fiddling with the microphone settings on my laptop. I'm not entirely happy with how it sounds yet, but working on it. But I do record them, try to get them up over on YouTube within a day or two. And I post everything, all my TikToks up over on YouTube. I've got some longer form videos over there when I see people having issues with like how government works. For example, now that we're talking about whether or not Donald Trump makes it to even Inauguration Day, or if they have to 25th him or whatever, I'm still seeing people say that automatically makes Mike Johnson Speaker of the House, and that's not or not Speaker of the House. That makes Speaker of the House Mike Johnson VP, and that's not the case.
No, it's not the
JD
case.
Vance would get to pick his own VP, and the Congress would have to approve it. I've got a whole playlist. It's like 7, 8 videos. It's not that long, but of things like that where I see people, and a lot of people getting it wrong. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to explain it. And I have all that up over on my YouTube page, Analytical Iowan on YouTube, Analytical Iowan on TikTok. If you find me on either one, I do have a link tree. So you can find me on the other if you want to.
Right.
And I also added in there, because we did that live with TJ, where
right. We did a combination. You
people
and
were
I and
asking,
TJ.
hey, how do I find TJ? So there's a link at the bottom of my link tree. It says affiliated creators or something like that. And I created a second link tree. And so I have a link to your link tree. I have a link to TJ's TikToks. And I'm going to keep adding creators that I'm dealing with like that, just so making it easier to find everybody.
Right. And I just want to make a statement here. At least half the people listening to this podcast are doing it on YouTube. Right now, you're on YouTube, right? You're listening to the Rational Boomer podcast, and I appreciate it. And I got a fair amount of followers or listeners on YouTube. Analytical Iowan Eric is on YouTube too. So you're already fucking here. Why more of you aren't going over to listen to his shit? You should. I listen to his stuff. So if you're listening to this podcast, take a moment when we come to the end here, check out his stuff, follow him, and let's boost up his following there too, because it's valuable information and we want to give him more traction to get the word out. We got to carry the narrative here. We need your fucking help. So do it.
Yeah. And I'm going to keep, if something were to happen, TikTok were to go away, I'm going to keep posting up on YouTube. I am looking into some other options, just on the off chance we need to do that, and keep the content going. But yeah, I will be putting, at some point when this posts, I'll be in the comment section. I almost always am. And I'll leave a comment or two. So it'll help you find me too. I'm slowly gaining some traction over there on YouTube. So I appreciate anybody who takes the time to jump over and follow me.
And we should mention, I get this question all the time. Are you on Blue Sky? Yes, I am on Blue Sky. So is Eric. I've been on Blue Sky for a little while. But people say, I'm talking to somebody. Is that you? And I got fucking imposters on Blue Sky too. So what you need to do is go to Rational Boomer 416. I couldn't even get Rational Boomer because there were already imposters of me before I fucking got there. So it's Rational Boomer 416. That's me. So check out that, because all the TikToks and everything are on Blue Sky as well. So, and how do they find you on Blue Sky?
Luckily, there are no imposters of me yet on Blue Sky. I am just Analytical Iowan over there, and that is also in my link tree. So if you find me on any of the platforms, I have my link tree posted on all of them. if you find me on one, you can find me on the rest at that point.
And I'm still not on Facebook, Instagram, or Threads because they suspended or banned me. And like I said before, even if they open it back up for me, I'm not going back based on Mark Zuckerberg and those fucks and those traitors that are supporting Donald Trump. So if you were on Facebook, you're going to have to come to YouTube or Blue Sky or TikTok. But I'm here. So check it out. Now, for those of you listening, I want to thank you for taking the time to do that. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.